Hi guys, this is day 22 of the AS Economics 42-day revision challenge, and today we are doing exchange rate and its relationship with inflation. We say there's a strong relationship between exchange rate and inflation. When we say inflation is also sometimes called our internal value of money, and I want to explain this concept: internal value of money. Why is that so? Because like inflation means we're looking at price level. So when the price level goes up, we say this that the purchasing power or value of money goes down. So price level has an inverse relationship value of money, and we call inflation to be your internal value of money. So when high inflation means rising price level, which means the value of money is going down. The second thing we want to talk about is that when you look at your exchange rate, we call exchange rate as your external value of money. External value of money, the value at which foreigners are transacting with you and you are transacting with foreigners. So internal value of money is inflation, and external value of money is exchange rate. The second thing we want to talk about within this discussion is this, that when you look at internal and external value, we say this, that inflation can affect exchange rate, and vice versa, exchange rate can also affect inflation. So there is what we call a two-way relationship between inflation or your internal value and exchange rate, your external value of money. So let's explore the two-way relationship. First, let's look at how the inflation affects exchange rate. So let's write number one is how inflation affects exchange rate. So when the price level of a country goes up, let me write this. When the price level rises, we notice that exports are becoming expensive. So PX means price of exports goes up, and price of imports are going down relative to domestic goods. And if such is the case, where exports are becoming expensive, we'll say this, that the quantity of exports will go down while the quantity of imports will go up. That said, we also notice that if the goods are elastic, then we can argue this, that the export expenditure will fall and the import expenditure will rise. The fall in export expenditure means that now, since there is lower exports happening, there will be a lower demand for pounds. So demand for pounds will fall. At the same time, the supply of pounds will go up because more imports are happening. So inflation can basically make the demand for pounds to fall and make the supply of pounds to rise. So if I show that in the diagram, so demand for pounds will go down. So let me make the axis first. So let's say this is our US value of pounds. Quantity of pounds, and this is my demand and supply, and currently the exchange rate is, let's say, E naught, quantity is Q naught. So when the price level goes up, because exports are becoming sort of expensive, people are buying less of exports, the demand for pounds is going down, and at the same time, because people are buying more imports as compared to before, because domestic goods are expensive, the result would be the supply of pounds will go up. So fall in demand, a rise in supply causes our exchange rate to fall from E0 to E1. So this results in the exchange rate to fall. The bottom line of the story is basically that when the price level goes up, the value or internal value of money falls, right? The internal value of money falls. But at the same time, we can argue this because the internal value of money is going down, your exchange rate also goes down, which means your external value of money also falls. So higher price level leads to lower internal value of money and therefore lower external value of money as well as the exchange rate falls. The next thing we look at is how our exchange rate can affect inflation. So let me write this. Number 2 is how exchange rate, your external value of money, can affect the inflation, which is your internal value of money. And we say this that when you look at exchange rate can affect both demand pull and cost push inflation. So let's assume exchange rate is going down. If the exchange rate goes down, now let's say pound become weaker in the foreign exchange market, we say this that the price of exports will now fall. Because let's say if pound was equal to $4, now let's say £1 become equal to $2, pound is becoming weaker. From a US perspective, when they were paying for a £1 worth of good, they were paying $4. Now for the £1 worth of good, they're only paying $2. So when the exchange rate falls, exports become cheaper. When the exports become cheaper, imports on the other hand will become expensive, because now a UK resident is only getting for a pound $2 worth of goods. So exchange rate falls, exports become cheaper, and imports become expensive. A fall of the price of exports lead to quantity of exports to go up. At the same time, a rise in the price of imports will result in quantity of imports to fall. And if we assume the goods are to be elastic, then we can argue this, that the quantity of exports, when it rises, you will also see export revenue to go up. Let me write this: export revenue to go up and imports revenue to fall. And that in turn means that the net exports, or X minus M, it rises. A rise in your net exports leads to what we call a rise in AD. And a rise in AD will mean there will be a possibility of demand pull inflation if the economy doesn't have the spare capacity to meet the increased demand. So if we draw an AD curve like this, so on my x-axis I'm going to write real GDP, on my y-axis I'm going to write price level. So if this is AD naught and AS naught, and if exchange rate goes down, we are saying AD will shift to the right as X minus M rises. And if the economy doesn't have the spare capacity or flexibility to meet the increased demand, that lack of flexibility or lack of spare capacity means the price level goes up and the real GDP goes up. But the more important part is this, that AD goes up, your price level goes up. So a weaker exchange rate or lower external value can lead to a rise in price level, and therefore we can say this a lower external value. So your a lower sort of external value or exchange rate, external value will lead to lower internal value. Now, similar is the case for what we call our cost push inflation. So, weak exchange rate can also cause cost push inflation to happen. So, let's talk about that. So, when the exchange rate is going down, we say this that imports are becoming what we call expensive. If imports are becoming expensive and we are importing key inputs, let me write this. If key inputs like oil is imported, which is the case for many countries like even Pakistan, key inputs like oil is imported, we will see that the quantity of imports will fall by much less, because your, first of all, demand is inelastic because we need that good, and the impact of this would be that the import expenditure will go up. This rise in import expenditure also means our costs of production will go up. And this rise in the cost of production means aggregate supply shifts back. So there will be a shift to the left of the aggregate supply. So aggregate supply shifts back, causing again our price level to rise. But this is what we call cost push inflation, which happens because now the key inputs are becoming expensive. So how do I show that in terms of a diagram? Well, we'll make the same diagram here, where there is real GDP on my x-axis, my price level is on the y-axis, and let's say equilibrium is happening at P naught. And now if I say there is what we call a fall in exchange rate, aggregate supply curve will shift backward, and this in turn will result in the price level to go up. So we're looking at both the demand pull and cost push inflation to happen when the exchange rate goes down. So to sum it up, inflation can affect the exchange rate, and exchange rate can affect inflation. In fact, exchange rate can affect both demand pull and cost push inflation.